Welcome, my dear friends. It's great to see you again. In case we haven't been introduced before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. And on this channel, I perform dramatic readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking to an interesting person about a role-playing game. The companion video to this one is my review of adventure module Into the Unknown, a solo adventure put out by Pacesetter Games and written by Ben Barsh, son of dear friend Bill Barsh. Since my research for Into the Unknown didn't yield a whole lot available online, this video I'm going to be interviewing its creator, Ben, about what went into making this module. And in this way, we're going to be contributing to the greater corpus of knowledge about the role-playing game industry, the individual modules in it, the creators in it, and their design philosophies. And we get quite a bit out of Ben on this one. I had a great time. Hope you do too. My dear friends, welcome to the show. Ben Barsh, the creator of, and proven that I bought this thing. I got a copy of it right here, Into the Unknown, and it's got his signature in there too. I can prove for a fact that I got this from him. See, you got the name right there. And so welcome to the show, Ben. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me. And I apologize for anyone who's got video and had to see my horrendous signature. I am working on it. It's getting better. I don't do it often, so I sometimes try to doodle in practice, but man, it's hideous. And I blame my dad for this. I'm just going to start the show hot by blaming Bill Barsh for something. His handwriting sucks, but his signature is great. If you ever have my dad's signature, it's really good, but his handwriting's terrible. So it's something that we flipped. My handwriting is great, but my signature is terrible. So there's a little bit of nugget of Pacesetter Games lore to kick the day off.
Shots fired. Man,
right
we
away.
Just started.
Right
that
out of the
wasn't
holster.
Even an interview question.
Safety was off.
Hostility. God, everybody down. Damn.
Trigger discipline does not exist. My finger was on the trigger, ready to go.
Wow. Wow. Now, you're talking about your dad, Bill Barsh, dear friend of the show. So
yes, indeed.
Watch yourself. And he was sober enough to come to communion at the con.
That's true.
Yeah. Stand up for my boy.
That's true.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ben. It's good to have you. So the review's about your title, Into the Unknown, which I enjoyed. I'm just curious about a few things that you could give us perspective on since you created it. You were the project manager for this thing. Let's start with something so basic as what inspired you to make this particular adventure?
Yeah, a few things. So the primary thing would certainly be Grave of the Green Flame, my dad's first solo adventure that we brought out for Pacesetter. That is now booked together in Legacy of the Green Flame, which is a few module set campaign that you can put together for solo, big hardcover. It's maybe like 60 pages longer than Into the Unknown for perspective. So I played that growing up because I didn't have a D&D group. So I thought, okay, great. I can just play the solo adventure. I think my dad was a genius growing up, by the way. Like he gatewayed us so hard into D&D, just not always through D&D. So for parents, listen up. Fantasy Forest, TSR board game, fantastic board game. Great for little kids. Transition into Dungeon next, okay? You can get the new version, but the older versions are better in my opinion. And then, we did all kinds of bigger board games, things of that nature, and choose your own adventure novels. This was a big deal for me and my sisters growing up. We read them all the time, read them over and over again. They're right on one of my bookshelves right here, The Endless Quest and like just the more children's TSR, like Jim Ward wrote a few of them, great books. So all of that combined really lent into the creation of Into the Unknown. But what inspired me to write Into the Unknown the way I did, right? So that was kind of why I wrote it in the first place. Big inspiration from my dad. He did solo adventures. Lathan's Gold is another great one, a TSR adventure. Goes to Lion Castle. So there's some older TSR modules that I played on before I ever even played D&D in a group. So my first experience was solo. And then actually writing the adventure, I wanted this to be a real introductory experience to solo. So this isn't anything crazy. You're not facing down super high level intelligent enemies that are just going to trick you for the sake of tricking you. This is a low level rags to riches hero adventure. And, you start off in a cave with kobolds. That's not a big spoiler. It's kind of how you find that out within like the first few pages. And then you uncover the deeper secret that's further back in the cave. And then you just go out into the world and there's not crazy new humanoid races to fight or these weird creatures that I decided to create because I just had like a nightmare. No, these are orcs and lizard folk and bandits and evil wizards. It's your classic adventure. And that's what you're always going to get from me is kind of your classic traditional high fantasy adventure. And I know some people might get sick of that or bored of it, but I don't know. I think The Fellowship is the greatest novel of all time, and I reread it every year because of that, right? So that's where my brain goes a little bit more. I wanted this to be a very introductory starter zone type experience, almost more akin to what you would find in an MMO starting zone, like Dunmoreau in the World of Warcraft or Elwyn Forest, right? These areas that you just drop into, and it's a great sandbox for your character to go explore, low stakes, get some nice rewards. And then after that, that's when you kick up the difficulty and really drive home that, once you get a few levels, this is the real world. Let's get down to it. So the sequel of Into the Unknown will be much more of that like grand, maybe a few region wide adventure. But what inspired me to write Into the Unknown, first and foremost, definitely my dad. And then as I get into the nitty gritty, all the fantasy works that I love, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Warcraft, all those things.
I bet Bill's going to love hearing that.
Yeah.
That,
yeah. So the shots fired, back in the holster. Okay. We're good. Everything's fine.
And so the setting and some of the people and places in it, did you have particular inspirations for those things? Like,
Yeah.
was this part of a home campaign that you ran or played in? The adorable couple at the giant chicken encounter, were those real people or something like
Would you
that?
do you think they are? Because you called that one out specifically. So I want to ask you, was that your thought when you read it? Or
They
or
seemed
you just thinking?
they seemed way too personified, that
Didn't
these
they?
people somehow. And I got that feeling. Like I
Yeah.
felt like I wanted to go visit whoever these people are, and I need a name and an address at this point.
Well, come visit me in Michigan and I'll bring you over to their house because those are my wonderful grandparents. I love them to death. My grandma on my dad's side will be in the follow up, but my grandparents mean the world to me. They were amazing. I grew up for the first few years of my life. We were right next door to them. So, they helped take care of us when, dad was off at work. My mom was a teacher. So she was kind of busy sometimes too. Yeah, those are my grandparents. Not to digress too hard, but my grandfather, fresh off the boat from Italy. So kind of same thing with my grandma's family. They had all kinds of farmland on this little tiny mountain side in Italy where they grew up. We've always had little gardens, in our backyards. Growing up, my mom and dad kept one and it was amazing. All the uncles, all the grandparents, and everyone makes wine actually. So a lot of Italian families make their own wine. It's generally terrible. Ours is really great. I want to bring some to North Texas one year because
I make my own
and
wine. There's a bunch of it back there.
perfect. We need to do a
Yep,
wine tasting now
we'll
at
do
North
it.
Texas. Let's do it. Book it.
Okay, next year.
I'll bring a few bottles. It'll be super fun. So we do that. And I just, I was just so grateful. Like they've done so much for me my entire life. And I'm just putting them in a book isn't really going to pay it back by any means, but it was just a sign of respect sort of thing. So Ben and Joanne are, as they're named, Ben and Joanne. They are in the book. They have a small little cherry farm that kind of calls back two different things, like the big farm back in Italy, but also Michigan is the home of cherries. Cherries are like our big fruit here. So I just kind of combined the two and had them have a little cherry farm. And then from there, I guess it's a side quest. So like it's not super, imperative to the narrative, but there is like a crazy little like chicken encounter, right? You come up to, and it's just very homey. Like even I think in the book, my cousins all loved this. I don't want to spoil it, but there is a part where your adventure can completely come to an end in that side quest, not through combat or any other D&D classic means. Your character can just not go on based on something. So if you're playing Into the Unknown, check out the side quest at the cherry farm because it's a good one.
Well, that thing that you didn't want to spoil, I believe when I hit that, I instantly picked up my phone and was like, Ben, are you serious?
Yeah.
What's going on here? This is hysterical. And you're like,
Yeah.
right.
Does the Italian family heritage kind of make a little more sense now with that
That makes
adventure?
more sense.
Yeah.
What part of Italy?
So it's in the region of Lazio. We're basically right between Rome and Naples, inland, maybe like 20 miles. So we're not like on the coast or anything. But Italy is kind of divided by like a big mountain strip, and then there's like smaller ones, annex ones outside of that. So we're more inland in like the mountain regions a bit. And it's a small little town called Santalia. And we try to go back every other year, roughly. After World War II is when they came over. It's your classic story. It came through Ellis Island, and only a few came over at first, sent money back, and then everyone was able to come over, kind of thing, and landed in Detroit because Detroit was booming at the time and there was a ton of work. So that's the little story there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so for the setting itself,
Yeah.
was this from whole cloth? Was this a game you played in?
Yeah, so all of my adventures written for solo are within the Pacesetter world, which we are building over time. And I know game worlds for publishers, often people don't use them because you're playing your own home world. And we encourage that. And that's why in our campaign books, we try to make it rather agnostic, though we are building our own world through our published books because you kind of have to do that for continuity's sake. But we understand people want to use their home world. Well, for solo, that doesn't really work, right? I mean, it can, but is anyone going to put in that much effort? No. So as a writer, I have to make sure that this region feels a little real. It feels like the people live here and it feels like somewhere you'd want to adventure in. So Farador in particular has always been my home campaign's kind of like safe region, right? It's a bit of a melting pot. There's a few different races and people who travel throughout there. There's not that many like evil enemies, right? There's not like a red dragon in a mountain or like any crazy like, oh, we're not going near that for 50 leagues. F no. There's a lich lord who used to live there in a citadel. Are you crazy? No. I'm gonna raise my family, my children elsewhere, away from that. That's crazy. So Farador is a bit more of a low key area, and that's why it was perfect for an introductory solo adventure. And then all the little areas are just kind of like some of them are little callbacks to my own life. Some of them aren't. Some of them are just fantasy thoughts. Mistwood is a very central town in the adventure. It's mimicked after my hometown a little bit called Milford, except there's some other elements in there that I just made up for fantasy's sake. Farador Keep, where you start out, is mimicked after actually my high school. I was very, very lucky and blessed to go to a beautiful Catholic high school that's been around for like 150 years. Looks like Hogwarts, old buildings, literally keep style buildings, multiple different ones. It was a campus. So it was really rad. I mean, going to school there every day, I was just like, I felt like I was in D&D, it was really cool. That was a big help for me as well, designing Farador Keep. So yeah, there's small stuff like that has trickled into the region for sure.
So when it comes to writing what you know to help make your world seem more lived in, you really did that. You lived that in
You
writing
have
this
to
book.
make it interesting, and same thing with the NPCs, right? I won't go through every NPC and tell who, what, where, and why,
Right.
but there's like little children who are mimicked after my cousin, like interactions I've had with my cousins that I thought were like hilarious, where I was just like, this is so just real life, this is life. This is the beauty of, we talked a little bit before, but I'm moving into the education world for employment and elementary education in particular. You just see everything, right? You see it all. You see it with parents, you see it with the kids, you see it with the grandparents, you see it in community, you see it at school, you see it everywhere. So taking the real life and making it a little fantasy, super fun. Less stressful too, because you're just like, okay, I need a brash NPC. I'll just think of like, my JV football coach. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, that guy was pretty brash. So what would he be like if he was here?
There you go. Now, in writing this book, I do have to ask about one design decision. Why
Mm-hmm.
is the table of contents at the back of the
Yeah.
book?
That's so funny you asked that because that was something that we made that decision and then I was like, that's immediately going to come up.
And here we are.
And here we are, finally. No, people have asked me about that before. This I stand by 1,000%. I love that we put it in the back because we didn't want you to be swayed anyway by looking through the table of contents because the chapter names might spoil something or they might give you a little information that you shouldn't have had yet, maybe the length of the chapter or whatever it may be. So we didn't want any like spoilers whatsoever in the beginning of the book. So this was actually Susie Mosby who did our layout for years. God bless her. She did amazing work for us. Her and Matt are crushing it with Mythmere games now. If you're a swords and wizardry person or just an old school person in general, just go check out Mythmere because their products are so good. But Susie literally brought that up. She was like, should we put the table of contents in the back? And I was like, I didn't even think about that. And I was like, yes, because you don't want the spoiler when you're playing through, number one. And number two, once you're done with the book, it's interesting to go look at and be like, oh, okay, so that's how that all weaves together. And then for your second playthrough, when you're a little, you don't care about spoilers as much, you kind of want to see what else happens. You can just go to the table of contents in the back.
Okay, I got you. Because, yeah, I was
Yeah.
wondering why is this back here like no other table of contents I've seen has been in the back of the book. It's always been
Yeah.
at the front because it's supposed to tell you what's in here. So, okay,
Yep.
that makes some
Nope.
sense.
Solo. Don't want any spoilers. Put it in the back. You can check it out after. But it's
I
also
hear
just
you.
there if someone wants to check it out before, they can always just flip to the back.
And so, solo adventures, that's something that Pacesetter's done quite a bit of. I count 4 titles so
Mm-hmm.
far. and y'all clearly intend to do more of those in the future. Now, I've heard your dad talk on This Old Dungeon, and when I talked to him in our interview, that he gets across the point that it's more difficult to design solo play adventures than it is group play modules. What's so different about design considerations between the two?
I would say it's at least 5 times harder to write a solo adventure. And I'm not pulling any punch there, genuinely. And I say this because I'm kind of fresh off a manuscript, so I've just done it again. And it's exhausting. It's a lot more of technical writing stacked on top of your any sort of adventure you're writing, period, is going to have a large level of narrative design, of course, right? You're creating a story. Well, then when you have to have that story mechanically and technically work so a player can play through it, it's a lot harder. I'll just give like one example here. If I'm entering into an entrance hall in a campaign style module, right? It's a big entrance hall inside of a castle. Perhaps there's a grand staircase in front of you that thins out as it gets to the top and then annexes left and right. Same thing on the bottom floor. There's one door to the left, there's one door to the right, there's a giant rug in front of you, just in front of the massive staircase. Behind the staircase is a door leading down to the basement. Okay. A lot of different things to deal with. Okay. But in the module, in the just general campaign module, that's really it. Or if there's a encounter, say it's like a rug of smothering or something, right? The rug comes to life if you step on it. That's a super easy thing to write. The problem is with solo, you have to account for everything. You have to then write different entries for each one of those different doors. What if one is locked? That will then spin off 3 different entries because you have to write an entry about what's the difficulty check to do the check. If you're doing old school, you have to say just make a thieving check, right, against your percentile. And then if they fail, okay, now go to area 34. You succeeded, go to area 42. So you're just constant, you have to be the complete arbiter of whatever happens, In the campaign module, there's a lot more for the DM to fill in between the lines, or you're just making that one entry instead of 4, right? Say you run into an end bad guy as well in a solo adventure. Well, I want to give you an option to talk to them first most of the time, because in the party, unless it's like a low intelligent monster that's just killing, you won't really be talking to them. But if it's a humanoid, if you're about to murder someone in that situation, sometimes there's that talk, right? This isn't 2004 Afghanistan CQB where you're kicking doors down and just whatever, you know what I mean? So in the solo adventure, you have to kind of take your time and write multiple different entries to have a vast variety of experiences. And that is what adds to the writing time of a solo adventure. So it really just comes down to the technical writing and then all of the different options that have to happen in a room, whereas normally a DM can just take care of it in one entry.
And so in this one, y'all have got a framework of how to approach it, the solo system, and you've got the adventurer points, which I found worked really well. It kept me honest. Fortunately, the dice were with me most of the time, so I didn't have to use a lot of them, but I did use a
Nice.
significant amount of them. And there's only one fight where I thought, I'm going to really get my butt whipped. This might be it. But the rest of it, fortune was with me. So I think those mechanics worked well. Were there some mechanical systems that y'all came up with and tried out first and decided those were no-goes? And what was wrong with them if you did have some?
I'll speak more in generalities because I'll be honest, no, we haven't really experimented with a lot of different systems other than the solo system. And here's why I say that. We don't have a lot of interest in creating a very light solo experience or one that isn't true to the game system or true to like D&D. So when I say Dungeons and Dragons, I think of a high fantasy role-playing game in which you're using a D20 for most of your rolls. You might work in some percentile dice, and then all the other dice are generally most likely for weaponry or spells or whatever it may be. We're actually resolving the outcomes, right? Once they've been contested by that D20 or percentile dice. So we really like to keep our system fully related to the game system you're playing. And that's why the solo system just augments the game system that you're playing. So it allows us to just keep that spirit alive. I've played other solo games where it's like, it's not really using a game system, or if it is, it's like, okay, you only have like, here's your 2 things your character can do. And sometimes you'll use them in the narrative and sometimes you won't. No, this is like as close as we can get to playing D&D without a game master. So that's why the solo system was kind of invented and then stuck with, because we were like, D&D works. Your game system works that you're playing. Like you bought it, right? It must work in some way. For you at least anyway. So why go away from that? So that's why we decided to do the solo system, augmenting rather than like creating something.
I think you effectively addressed the core problem of a solo gaming experience is disincentivizing cheating. Because if you're the
Yeah.
only one in the game, then you can say, well, I succeeded at this, but then you're lessening the experience.
Yeah.
and you're robbing yourself of a sense of accomplishment, which is where the reward really comes from. And so y'all give a decent amount of leeway to make up for the fact that it's usually one PC going through all this
Hmm.
and being understanding of that. And so I didn't feel there was never the incentive there for me to rig anything in my favor because what y'all did gave me what I thought was a fair shot at success.
That's
Like,
all you can do
you
as
know,
a solo designer. You're not going to make a Orcus encounter that you could write in a D&D module, right? Because if I'm DMing for my group, I can do so much as a DM, right? There's so many wild cards you can throw during that encounter. But when it's solo, man, that sandbox gets really small, right? But if you write it in a certain way, you can expand it and make sure that the character still has fun and feels challenged but not robbed of greatness because of some arbitrary asshole DM thing, right? To be completely frank, calling back to the cartoon, jerk dungeon master from the D&D cartoon. Sometimes, you just let the player thrive. Just to finish out that point, I never wrote any of these solo adventures trying to like beat the player. This is a solo adventure, right? This is because game night was canceled or because you're bored on a airplane flight, on a bus ride, or at home, what I'm doing, whatever. You're just bored. This isn't mythic rating in World of Warcraft. You know what I mean? This isn't the top 1% of output versus monster output, right? It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to give you the story first kind of thing and just get you into that framework of D&D. But also a lot of people use these adventures to go play in their home game with. If their DM says, hey, we're starting this campaign at level 5. Some people have emailed me and said, hey, I used this solo adventure to get to level 5. I got some of the magic items approved with my DM and blah, blah, blah. And then off to the races. And I'm like, that's a sweet way to start a campaign. So,
nice.
having it be a little more like not trying to kill you around every corner, trust me, those adventures will come. I will write an expert solo adventure where it's like, if you're new, don't buy this one. But this is, it's the introductory one. So there's some things that can kill you in there, but maybe not
I
always.
like that technique though of what you just outlined of using this to fatten up your player characters for a
Mm-hmm.
higher level campaign because that's one issue I've had with getting my mind right for a campaign that says we're going to start at level 5, level 7, this or that, the other. I don't know the character as well, and I feel like I haven't earned where he's at. Whereas if I grab this thing and run through it, make it to the appropriate level, okay, now I know the guy.
Oh, and
And
you just
now I've
wait
got
for the
something.
0 level solo adventures I'm writing too. I'm writing 0 level ones, which will be a little more of that like game agnostic because there's like less going on, right? You don't have spells yet. You don't have magic, right? You're a dude or a chick going through the world. That's it. So those will be fun too. And kind of hit on what you're talking about of like, yeah, I'm not a big like, I don't think I'm an alienate anyone actually by saying this because this is pretty common thought now, but like the backstory of 5e needs to be left with 5e. Okay. So I know it might be a little bit of a hot take, but the 4 page long backstory needs to die with 2014 Player's Handbook. It does. Because that game pretty much is the last few people in the line are throwing the dirt over the casket. It kind of feels like backstory is created through gameplay. Your character is created through gameplay. This is a game. No one really cares about off screen stuff. People don't even care about off screen stuff when they're watching movies or plays. You know what I mean? Like it's not interesting to the audience or your fellow players. That's your audience in the situation, right? To have all these things happen off screen and not be a part of it. So yeah, I know you could kind of say, well, the solo adventure is the same way, but at least you actually experienced something. At least you
Yeah.
actually rolled the dice. So it's a little
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you get a little more buy-in with the character. You care more about the character because you've spent more time relating with them and going through stuff with them. Whereas if you have a 7th level magic user and they get offed in the first encounter, then I don't really care. So you're not that invested in it. This is a way of helping with that. That's a good technique. I like it. Uh,
Yeah, totally. And you might even play a little differently in that opening, like you said, because of that, right? You might play a little safe. You might run from a fight, right? You might say, okay, I actually spent a lot of time making this character and leveling them up through a few hours a week doing solo stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna run from what the hell ever. I'm portaling the hell out of here. This sucks.
I don't want to die right
Yeah, I
now.
don't want to
Yeah.
die. Spent all that
So,
time.
in coming up with the different versions of this, because this is the 5e, but Into the Unknown is also made in BX and Sword and Wizardry versions. Was there much of a difference in what you had to do to make them, or is it virtually the same rules considerations?
Yeah, so this is going to launch me into a this so we so just for the audience, this is we were talking about this a little bit pre-show. And this was actually when we got into this part of the conversation, I was like, okay, we need to pause here and we need to go live because this
Mm-hmm.
is I have thoughts about this and I have information about this. So in the instance of Into the Unknown, to simply answer the question quickly, and then I'll digress. The fifth edition Swords and Wizardry and BX versions are different from solely the gameplay perspective, solely the rolling dice perspective. There is nothing about the narrative, there's nothing about the characters or anything from that perspective that's going to be different. For this adventure, no, it was more of just a conversion. At the time, I was playing more 5e than anything else. So I initially wrote this one in 5e to not have it be converted to 5e because I was doing all the 5e conversions at the time. And then my dad and I went through and did all the other conversions for the other books. Really just the monsters and the rolls. That was really it. This is the interesting part, the second part of answering this question. Okay, so we've been doing Pacesetter games for like 16 years, which is crazy to think. And of course, during that 16 years, it hasn't been like how it's been now, where we're making like really big products and more flashy stuff. It was just my dad making one or two modules a year, maybe for like a long time, most of that 16 years. So we've been cranking in this new era of like the Into the Unknown era, the Endless Encounters Dungeons era of big flashy books. So we were talking a little earlier about game systems and all that. And everyone's kind of making their own game system right now. And we've been working on ours before the game system thing became a thing, right? We were working on ours before the OGL thing blew up, but we didn't decide to just put it on Kickstarter and rush it out the door because it was a hot thing to do. So we've been waiting, and I think now it's like a decent time. I think over the last few years, people have been more so on the game system thing, and it seems like it's kind of fallen off a little bit now. So for the future of what we will do with our own Pacesetter products, similar to how most companies like Goodman Games or Trollord Games have like a base game system that they will always create for, we will be doing the same thing with our game system called Dungeon X. Dungeon X is really a bridge between the old school and the new school. And we say that because we grab mechanics from 5e, like always rolling high with your d20, right? That's in other game systems now too. Disadvantage and advantage. Great system. Like one of the better game design philosophies to come out of a game in a long time. And it's so freaking simple. So crazy that it was so cool. But also, modern class design and race design sucks. Like there's nothing interesting about playing classes anymore because they're so similar, right? Every fighter has got magic, every wizard can heal, and right. So like it just gets off to this weird thing. So we design our new modern game system with an old school engine, right? So only the modifications are adding some newer features. So thieves still have thieving abilities in our game, which kind of clashes with the modern thing a little bit. But all that to say, our adventures now on will be based on Gen X, and then whatever other, because we're still going to publish for third-party game systems. We've always viewed ourselves as a third-party publisher for the third-party publishers, right? We've worked with Goodman Games, we've worked with Mythmere Games, right? We've worked with tons of other game companies on their games. I'll give you an example. If we do a solo adventure, which this example will most likely happen, that's why I'm using it as an example. For Dungeon X, that's our base system, high fantasy game system. Think more akin to Middle Earth or Greyhawk, right? These more traditional fantasy worlds. If we did a Shadow Dark version, that book will be very different. Like the interior of the book is going to be different. A lot of the art will likely be different. The layout in the book might even be different to match the Shadow Dark style. And then the actual adventure will have to change because Shadow Dark is just such a different game world. So when a game system or game world allows us to really kind of have two different versions of this book, that's what interests us a lot about the next 16 years of Pacesetter. So base Dungeon X, high fantasy, traditional always. If you've ever played anything, I'm talking like BX to 5e, you'll feel so comfortable in this game system. And honestly, the 5e people will probably feel the most uncomfortable because there are weird things like thieving abilities, right? There is a cleric turning table. Weird, right? That hasn't been in books for years. But we love it. I mean, I love it. There's nothing wrong with your cleric has such a unique role. You know what I mean? Like, but also to do that, you've got to buff undead, right? You've got to make them scary again. So Dungeon X is attempting to do all these things to return the game to a more rooted, grassroots, ground level, kind of like guerrilla warfare style of adventure, where your adventurer has no idea. Like you're new, you're fresh, you're green to this world. It's the rag to riches story, So we'll do everything for Dungeon X. So that's a long way to answer what's the difference between the 5e Swords Wizardry and BX Into the Unknown. Not as much, but in the future, yes, these adventures will be totally different. So for Into the Unknown, like I said, I'm going to make a PDF super cheap. So if you want to go pick it up and play it, just grab what game system you're more familiar with. That's my advice always. And if you're not familiar with any of them, my advice is to kind of pick up the 5e one just because like you can get the starter rules for free online. All of the monsters that we don't have are just open source. So it's easier to just get started. But if you like that old traditional feel, Swords and Wizardry is a good one too, because they're also still creating adventures for Swords and Wizardry. That's a supported game system, so it's a good one to get behind.
Good deal.
Long answer. So sorry. Jeez, that was like really long winded.
I wanted to know about your experience with the systems, and you
Yeah.
gave me feedback on your experience with the system. So you answered the question, you passed the test.
I've got a lot of experience with each game system, 5e, I DM'd for almost a decade. Swords and Wizardry, I worked for Fraud God Games for a while. I pioneered an entire we went through the entire Swords and Wizardry rule book, and we broke down the rules and gave even home rule tips and all that kind of stuff. And BX / first edition was what I grew up playing. So that's why Into the Unknown was made in those 3 game systems, because I just adore each one of them. And I just was like, this needs to be done for all 3. I'll never do that again. 3 systems is too many for one book. All like that, like awesome speech and just this such, I'm so looking forward to the future. We'll do 2 max though for every book, because it's a lot. It's a lot.
I hear you. All right, man. Well, I appreciate all that background on the module and what's to come. So until we talk again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone for listening.
Now, wasn't that interesting? Ways to get in touch with Ben I've put in the description below, so reach out to him. He's always happy to talk. And what are your thoughts about our interview? Some of his design considerations, your experiences with his games. Drop those in the chat. I'd love to see them. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this around. Help keep the conversation moving amongst all of us in the hobby. And for the normies who aren't already RPG fanatics, maybe this is what pulls them into it. Hearing a couple nerds talk passionately about the game might get them interested to try it out themselves. And with a solo module, there's no pressure. They don't have to do funny voices in front of other people. They could just try it out for themselves, see if they like that experience. Because if they do, they can either play more of those or maybe they'll join you at the table. Always a possibility. So my dear friends, that's what I've got for now. Until next time, I wish you nothing but the best.